No more sweets, beta. You just had one. Sweets are banned in our house. Oh, come on. Eat as many sweets as you like. Childhood is to enjoy. Eat sweets, don't eat sweets, doesn't really matter. All parents have their own style of parenting that reflects how they were themselves raised and what they value. What parenting style you opt for your child is significant as its effects remain with the child throughout their life. The latest episode of the Big Talk About Tiny Humans with Devishobha and Meghna discusses the four research backed styles of parenting and how they impact a child's development. Join us for the latest episode of the Big Talk About Tiny Humans.
Almost every job in the world requires training, except parenting.
You need to learn parenting on the job, and that can be really hard.
Here on the Big Talk About Tiny Humans podcast, we want to help you navigate the world of parenting better and make your lives a little bit easier.
Hi, I'm Meghna.
And hi, I'm Devishobha.
Every week, we bring you the best research on parenting,
Top tips from experts,
and actionable strategies to confront the numerous challenges that all parents and educators face.
So let's get started, shall we?
Did you know our parenting style can affect everything from how much our child weighs to how they feel about themselves? It's important to ensure your parenting style is supporting healthy growth and development because the way you interact with your child and how you discipline them will influence them for the rest of their life. In today's episode, Devishobha and I discuss parenting styles and the kind of far-reaching impact they can have on our child's development well into the future, and how we can all tweak our parenting style. Let's get started. So how are you doing, Shobha?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Meghna.
Okay.
Just looking forward to the rest of the week. And it's been a pretty usual week so far. Nothing very eventful or nothing very dull. So it's going on.
Okay.
Thankful for that. Yeah.
I'm really excited about today's episode because we are talking about parenting styles. And, there are so many parenting styles thrown about in the media, tiger mom and panda mom and all that. But what we're going to talk about today is actually coming directly from research.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get started. So, Shobha, what are parenting styles? Let's first discuss that and tell our audience what is the meaning of the term parenting styles and why it's important to talk about them.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Meghna. I think I share your excitement about this topic because this is a really important aspect that is often very unconsciously cultivated in us as parents because a lot of it is imbibed from our own childhood and we pass it on. So parenting styles are basically a complete package, right? It conveys the parents' overall attitude towards child rearing, child raising, and thereby towards the child itself, the involvement towards the child. It takes into account the whole body language of the parent when they are interacting with the child, the tone of voice, how they display their emotions, the quality of attention of the parent while interacting with the child, and even their views about the quality of time and attention that they're supposed to give to the child when they are involved with the child, and even when not. So parenting styles are often considered as traits because they're not dependent on one particular event or one particular trigger. It is often a trait because of the consistency in their attitude, and it cuts across time and context, and it speaks to their personality as parents, and thereby also affects the relationship with the child, which is why this topic is so important.
And of course, the one major part where it plays out, is how parents choose to discipline their kids.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yes.
And it's very interesting how, sometimes when the way we discipline our kids instinctively, it comes as the way we were ourselves disciplined.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I said a lot of it is imbibed from our own childhood, from our own parenting, from our own parents, right? The experiences that we gathered as children from our own parents. And of course, going forward, I'll also talk about the discipline techniques, how they vary in different kinds of styles. And I'll go into it in a lot more detail.
Awesome. At this note, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss, is it even possible to, bucket the wide range of parenting behaviors into a few categories? We'll catch you at the other end. Welcome back. So we were discussing about parenting styles. So Shobha, I think our audience would be really interested to know if we can, the way we parent, can it really be bucketed into categories?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Meghna. And researchers like child psychologists and even social psychologists who have been involved in this kind of work say that parenting styles are basically evolved or bucketed based on two main attributes, right? Attributes of personality. One is responsiveness or warmth, and the second is demandingness or control. How much of warmth you display as a parent, and even as a person in your personality, how much of warmth you display and how much of control you wish to have. That speaks a lot, and that influences a lot the kind of parenting experiences you can give to your child. And responsiveness or warmth is the extent to which the parent responds to the child's need in a warm and supportive manner. Though all parents would want to do that, responsiveness can range from no response at all to any of your child's needs. Okay, we will discuss those styles, and fulfilling every one of their demands.
Both of which are so unhealthy, right?
Absolutely.
Both the extremes are unhealthy.
Yeah. There's a saying in Sanskrit, it's called Ati Sarvatra Varjayat. So wherever there is Ati, that is too much of anything, is not
bad.
good. Yeah.
I love that quote, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So the second one is demandingness or control. And this trait is about the extent to which parents want their children to meet their expectations on behavior. Right. And this can range again from no expectation at all to very strict enforcement of expectations and the repercussions, right, expected if the child does not comply. And this is where the topic of discipline comes into play, what you brought up, right? So the beliefs of the parent about disciplining tactics, how much of adherence to rules and how much of adherence, not only how much of adherence, but also how you want to enforce, is all about parenting style. And an interplay of these two factors determines the quality of nurture, control, and independence that their children experience and how they turn out as adults.
Right. So that's, those two sort of dimensions are super interesting. So why don't you now tell us what are the 4 styles of parenting that that are based on these 2 dimensions, and what does research say about the outcomes of each of the styles of parenting?
Sure. So, like you said, Meghna, there are a lot of parenting styles that have evolved. We see a lot of styles like helicopter parenting, lawnmower parenting, tiger parenting, a lot of this. But all of these can be bucketed into 4 major categories, right? And they are the authoritarian parenting style, the authoritative parenting style, the permissive parenting style, and the uninvolved parenting style. And each of these styles a variance of those 2 personality dimensions that I had explained before, demandingness and warmth, right? So the authoritarian parenting style is like, I say, you follow, no questions asked.
Because I said so. Yes.
Yeah, I said so. For everything, everything just has one response, that is because I said so. And it involves very high demandingness and very low responsiveness. If you were to look at the grid, right, the demandingness and responsiveness grid, the warmth, all these factors, it just involves, it's very much tending towards very high demandingness, high control, and very low warmth, right? And parents set the rules, children are expected to follow them. And there are no questions encouraged. And the effects of the style of parenting is that usually children, seem to be very well behaved, right? And compliant, because obviously there's a lot of control, right? But it only lasts as long as they are under the gaze of the parent, right? As soon as they're independent, as soon as they are away from the gaze of the parent, children tend to be more, defiant. Okay. In this kind of disciplining, there's a lot of spanking, yelling, and they are observed to hold on to anger and resentment, right? With their children, there's a lot of conflict, especially during adolescence, because the child is just then trying to, explore their identity, right? And as a result, they're known to exhibit very antisocial and reclusive behaviors later. Some of these children who experience authoritarian parenting, they're also seen to, have a higher incidence of substance abuse and suicidal tendencies because of one major reason, because of their need for interaction and validation and communication not being met from a very early age, right? This is the authoritarian parenting style, which is obviously, like, from the results and from the research that we see, it's not an ideal parenting style. Right. The second parenting style, right, is the authoritative parenting style. Right. This is very different from authoritarian parenting style because it's characterized by a combination of demandingness and responsiveness, okay, in an assertive, positive, consistent manner. Right. So parents adopt a very child-centric approach, right, while using discipline tactics with their children. And this style kind of picks up elements of authoritarian parenting, that is, they enforce limits on their children, but they do not give in to unreasonable demands, right? And they are not unreasonable themselves, right? And they set behavioral expectations, and they do give consequences, but they also temper their responses according to the needs of the child. So they're very responsive, very warm, and also understand that the child needs limits, right? A growing child needs limits. They feel safe within limits because that is what parents are for, right? So
yeah, so it's not like authoritative parents don't have any rules and limits.
yeah,
They do.
They do have, but see, when authoritative parents set their rule, eventually you'll see that the children understand why the rules are there.
Yeah,
and
the reasoning behind it, and they don't grow resentful just because there's a rule.
Exactly. So a marked characteristic of this style of parenting is that there's a lot of cooperation between the parent and the
respect,
child.
right? I mean, the
and
parent
respect.
recognizes that, okay, my child needs the rule, but I will not impose it like a dictator, like Hitler.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and true to that, the effects of the authoritative parent style, according to research, is that they place children are very communicative. Okay, it encourages a lot of critical thinking, communication, and emotional regulation in their children. They do not hesitate to bring up their problems to their parents because they know they will be heard, they will be understood, and generally the environment in an authoritative parent's home is very warm, and there's a lot of mutual respect, and parents hold their children to very high expectations. This is a very important point, because it's not like they let go, right? They hold them to very high expectations, but they support their children, and they take responsibility to provide them with a lot of resources and support that the child requires to meet those expectations, which is a very major difference.
So that's what I find fascinating, that both authoritarian and authoritative parent hold their children to high standards, but the way they enforce that is so different.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a very important aspect of authoritative parenting, and the third kind of parenting is permissive parenting. Right. So permissive parenting is extremely lenient, right? These are parents who want, they do not give any kind of direction or regulation to their children. They kind of adopt a kids will be kids approach and shy away from imposing rules. Very weak kind of parenting. And this parenting style takes elements of authoritative parenting style, in that the parents are generally warm and responsive, but the parents adopting this style do not believe in enforcement of discipline or rules, which kind of makes it very hard for the child to understand their limits and regulate their behavior and emotions. Right. So there's very little room for limit setting. There's very little room for practice of regulation and things like this. And one main characteristic of this parenting style is that parents are often very, they are known to bend their own rules, right? And this results in children receiving a lot of mixed messages, a lot of confusion about what rules to follow and what they're expected to do, thereby leaving the child to figure it out for themselves a lot of the time, right? So this is not a very ideal parenting style, because research again shows that children who are subjected to this parenting style or environment show a lot of impulsive behavior because of the disregard for rules and limits, right? If you see a child, just binging on, chocolates or candies just
or
at
Netflix.
Any time, Netflix, and staying up all night, then you can be sure that this is permissive parenting, right? they grow without limits. So when they actually grow up, into adults, and see that there is actually not, I mean, the world doesn't behave like their home environment, right? There's a lot of difference. So suddenly their encounter with authority in later life leaves them at a very high risk of anxiety, aggression, and even dejection, right? And similar to children of authoritarian homes, children of permissive parents are also prone to the risk of substance abuse and depression due to too much and too little of the same things, control and limits, right? So these are like the opposite end of the spectrum, right? And they typically fit the bill of entitled children, right? Such children are likely to be, physically unhealthy also because of, no limits in terms of their, no regulation in terms of their eating habits or sleeping habits. They do not have an ideal routine, right? So yeah, it shows up in poor dental health, poor personal hygiene, poor control of their environment and things like that. So basically, this is not an ideal parenting style for inculcating good habits in children, right? And the fourth style of parenting is the uninvolved parenting style, right? And this style is basically, I don't know and I don't care, right? So the uninvolved parenting hardly has any rules for their children because they themselves are loath to enforcing rules because it's just too much work for them. They regard it as too much work, setting rules, enforcing rules, monitoring them. They are hardly aware of what their children are up to, and they don't offer any kind of guidance or parenting attention. And often children subjected to uninvolved parenting styles, they are treated like adults, and they're just small in size, like they're tiny humans, tiny adults, but they're expected to take their own decisions. And I mean, their decisions are not questioned. There's hardly any communication with the children. There's no emotional, display of emotion because it just takes so much of involvement. There's not even expression of anger or concern, nothing at all. And generally, there's an atmosphere of apathy and disarray. And usually, research shows that this kind of parenting style is usually a result of a mental illness of the parent, or addiction to substances, or a complete lack of knowledge or interest in child rearing, which is also, sometimes attributed to a lot of other factors like physical health, mental health issues, and things like that.
Yeah.
And
it's
I would
very
like to bring
commonly
up
also seen in families, Shobha, where there is a chronically ill parent.
And this
So
parent, and one of the other parents is also a caregiver, perhaps.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
right.
the kids end up getting neglected. So this parenting style is also called a neglectful style.
Right. I just would like to bring up a very interesting point. There's this book called Running with Scissors, right?
Okay.
And this is a book, this is which has been even adapted into a movie. It's a very interesting book. It's written by a person called Augustus Burroughs. He's a media personality. And this book actually gives a very interesting account of how his childhood was. Like, it was like complete mayhem. His mother had a mental illness which he did not know about for a very, very long time, and he was taken into care in a foster home environment, where again there was a different kind of a disarray. And I mean, that house or that home had lots of children and still had the uninvolved parenting style, in a totally different way. So it's a very interesting read. And, it's fascinating how he became such a successful personality, despite growing up like this. So, I mean, I would definitely recommend this book to everyone who's interested in learning, how it works in real life. And, if you can, draw any lessons or any kind of inspiration from this book, right? It's definitely worth a read, right? So, yeah, I do recommend that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. At this note, let's take a break. We just learned about the 4 different styles of parenting backed by research. And now, when we come back after the break, we'll discuss which one is the most effective one and how can we all try to tweak our parenting style to be more effective parents. Welcome back. So, Shobha, we just discussed the 4 styles of parenting that are backed by research. I think it's a no-brainer that the authoritative style is the most effective style of parenting, right?
Yeah.
And what makes it effective is the combination of just being right, no
Yeah.
extremes, not too much control, not too much leniency, not too much demandingness, and not too much structure, just right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question is, how can we all try to become more authoritative parents? Suppose I'm an authoritarian parent, or suppose I'm a permissive parent. How can I tweak my parenting style and become more authoritative?
Absolutely, very much possible. And I think it depends on three things, right? And I call it by the acronym EAR, ear, like give a year to your child and give a year to your own self, right? And just kind of monitor.
Nice.
So I will explain the acronym, but I think the crux of the matter is that authoritative parents acknowledge their children's feeling, which cannot happen without acknowledging their own feelings, right? They help kids label their emotions because obviously they're paying attention to their emotional state, which will lead them to helping them with emotional regulation. And in the meanwhile, while doing that, they also give a lot of attention to their own emotional state, right? And they teach them, while they're teaching them to recognize their feelings and how it's affecting their behavior, it's a rite of passage for them as well. It's a personal growth project for them to also pay attention to their own feelings and how to recognize their triggers and things like that. So, one of the things that you can definitely do, right, in the EAR paradigm is that E stands for emotional regulation. So, one is every time you see that your child is upset, because childhood is about getting upset for even sometimes very
smallest of
smallest
what
things.
appears to
Sometimes
adults as trivial.
yeah, as trivial. Sometimes they would have asked you for something, and the next minute when you bring it up, they say they're just looking at it, and that becomes the cause of their distress, right? So yeah, so the next time your child is upset, it's like, just take a breath and resist minimizing their feelings, right? Don't use the words like it's no big deal or stop crying, or just don't trivialize their emotions by saying this is no reason at all, this is not something that you can get upset about. And to them, I mean, to us as parents, obviously it's not a big deal because we are obviously plagued by much bigger problems. But to them, like you said, it's a very big deal, right? So validation of their emotions by saying, I know what you're going through, I know what you're feeling right now. So that is the first step to taking charge of emotional regulation and connecting emotionally with your child, right? And
Shobha, so when I talk to parents, right,
yeah.
Indian parents have this idea ki बच्चे को ना rough or tough banana hai, like, oh my God, all this talk that you do about feelings, Dr. Meghna, is just, अरे हमारा बच्चा tough कैसे बनेगा? So can you just tell us briefly, Shobha? I know I'm interrupting your ear, but this is an extremely important point to flag. Can you tell us briefly, why is validating a child's feelings so important? And why actually it ends up resulting in making children more resilient rather than the opposite?
So validating feelings is important because you help them connect with their own feelings and let them know that feeling a certain way is not the same as reacting to the situation in a certain way. So feelings are okay, you accept them, but the way you respond is something that you can control, and that is what you're teaching them, right? So it's okay. So the comment that you hear from parents, right, ki rough and tough banana hai, that's because they're confusing the emotion with the regulation, right? So teaching them to learn about their emotions, what they're feeling, name them, and recognize what they're feeling and eventually, if you keep doing this for 6 months to 1 year, the child as young as 3 to 4 years can easily recognize what their triggers are, right? And once they recognize their triggers, they're very well able to regulate their responses. So when they are able to regulate a lot of adults can't do it because they've never been taught, right? This because of this confusion of being rough and tough, just because you can suppress your feelings. Suppressing your feelings is not being rough and tough. Displaying your emotions without any kind of caution or any kind of control is not being rough and tough. I've seen so many parents, and I'm sure you see a lot more. Yelling is considered being in control or being.
It's the opposite. It's quite the
Yeah,
opposite.
it's quite the
A yelling
opposite.
parent is the one parent who's not in control of themselves.
Absolutely. So, to answer your question, Meghna, it's very important to regulate and validate your emotions. First of all, validate your emotions because it goes through a rite of passage, right? So, first you recognize the trigger, then you name the emotion, then you're choosing a response. So, when you choose a response, imagine the kind of control you're giving the child. I'm talking about this. EAR stands for autonomy. So when you are able to choose a response, you are bestowing a lot of autonomy in children, which is the biggest gift you can give your child when you are raising them, right? A child who is raised with autonomy, you can trust them to make the right decisions, to be responsible, and to be accountable for whatever they are doing, right? And this is not something that comes suddenly when they are 18, when they are out into the world.
Yeah.
It cannot come all of a sudden, right? It has to be inculcated, it has to be practiced, and it has to be shown to them multiple times that they can do it. So validating their feelings and helping them choose a response is one of the first steps to that. So I hope I have answered your question on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So let me move on to the autonomy part. One of the basic traits of authoritative parents is that they expect the kids. Remember, we said that they set a lot of limits. There's a lot of rules in the household of an authoritative parent, and they expect very high standards of behavior and achievement from their kids. That's because they expect their kids to be responsible. But the major difference is that they just don't expect it, they set them up for success, right? And that happens through a series of steps. So for example, they see the child faltering in a certain area. For example, the child needs help with her schedule, school. She's getting overwhelmed, she's being she's just not able to manage her time. She's there's no limits on her sleep time, or even her nighttime waking schedule and things like that. So what does an authoritative parent do? So first is they set limits, right? And they don't set limits and say this is my rule. They say why they are setting the limits. So one of the things again about authoritative parents is that they give consequences, they explain the consequences, but they're not consequences like, hey, you know what, I'll give you a thrashing if you don't do this. It's not
or I'll
like
take
that.
away the TV from you.
Yeah, it's not consequences like these, but consequences that make a lot more sense. Because remember, a growing child is also very highly cognitive being, right? They can understand things way more than we give them credit for. And when we give these kind of threats, right, maybe when they're very young, they listen once or twice, or maybe for a very limited period of time. But as they're growing, they realize the futility of, or if not the futility, at least the temporariness of this consequence, right?
Yeah,
So
it stops being a threat after some time. No?
Yeah,
it stops scaring the child into submission after some time.
Yeah, so
they'll be like, big deal, kya kar loge? Isse zyada aap kya kar loge?
Exactly. So one of the things about authoritative parenting is that they take the time to explain natural consequences. So, for example, if a child is not sticking to his sleep schedule, obviously the authoritative parent will say that, you know what, you are a growing child and your brain needs so much sleep. Otherwise, you're going to be restless for the entire week. And this is going to have a huge impact on your learning, on your health, and things like that. Right. And even something that matters more to the child. Tomorrow during your lunch get together, you're going to be feeling all groggy and you won't be able to connect with your friends. You might lose your friendships because of that. So things that make sense to the child, connect to the child in a much more palpable manner. That is the style of an authoritative parent, while also setting limits. Right. So they are very supportive. They run through checklists. They support the child in their schedule, in whatever they want their child to achieve. So again, high standards, but again, a lot of support. So that is one of the characteristics. And autonomy. One more thing I do want to stress is that when authoritative parents support their children, or hold their children to very high expectations, they do not get involved in every aspect of their activities. So they will set an expectations and they expect their child to do, a certain part, right? But support them by doing some other activity for them. For example, if a child is supposed to pack her bag, right? That is autonomy. That is setting them up for
Yeah.
independence, right? But if she's not able to do that, the authoritative parent will create a checklist for her, to help her. So she's not doing it for her, but she's helping her do it, right? Through,
This is such an apt example. Yesterday, I was
yeah,
talking to this mom of a preteen. The boy
right,
is 9.5.
right.
And she was complaining to me how he gets late for school every day. They have like a 20-minute walk to school, so he doesn't really, take the school bus. And how he delays it every day, every day, every day by dilly-dallying, by this and that. So I'm like, then what do you do when he runs late? He's like, what do? We have to, ultimately, it becomes so late that we have to go drop him in the car. So I'm like, but this is basically you bailing him out. You're enabling him to become late, because he knows that the backup option of, if I get late, my mommy and daddy will drop me in the car. So what happens if you don't drop him? She thought for some time, and she thought, and she's like, nothing. He will have to miss school. And I was like, will that be pleasant for him or unpleasant for him? And she's like, it'll be very unpleasant because he'll crib and cry that, I didn't get to spend time with my friends. So I was like, see, this is a natural consequence. Without you sort of taking over completely, you're allowing your 9.5, 10-year-old some autonomy, because they get to decide, that I have to get ready on time and I have to eat my breakfast on time and be ready for school in time. But if you keep bailing him out, he will not learn those skills.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is a very apt example, and this is so common, right? We all do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So this was the autonomy part, like
right.
encouraging autonomy, setting limits, but not doing it for them, but only supporting them. So that is encouraging autonomy.
Yeah.
And then the last part is being consistent with your rules, right? What you quoted just now, the example that you gave is like the most apt example, because rules, right? When you're not consistent with saying that, hey, you know what, if you miss school, I am not going to drop you, right? And this is a rule that you have to start like 20 minutes before time. And if you miss it, then it's a consequence for you to bear, right? Consistency. Now, if you keep faltering on what you have said or what you deem as threats, right?
Then your rule will not work.
It will not work. So consistency with rules is very important. Sticking to timings is important. Sticking to your nose is important, right? So I've seen a lot of children. I've seen my own daughter do that. When she was very young. Even now she does it. My younger one, she's very that way. She's very persistent. But when she was younger, she used to be so persistent and persuasive. She was like
persistent and persuasive, two deadly things. Deadly combination.
Very, very. Oh my God. She's like, she was at the dining table and we had to leave somewhere. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm giving you 2 minutes. Remember the rule where we say we keep prompting them. She's like, I said, you have 2 minutes. Then I said one more time, I said 2 minutes. She's like, Amma, you're giving me very small 2 minutes. I want big 2 minutes.
So cute. So cute. Big 2 minutes, seriously. So with kids, young kids, the concept of time is only not there.
Yeah, so it's a journey. It's a journey to be enjoyed. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Shobha, now the most important question in a way, because as you know, no two parents will have the same parenting style. Right? And that's where the clashes begin. My dad, if I talk about him, he was extremely authoritarian. My mom was authoritative. And now when I look at my husband and I'm quite authoritative, and he vacillates between being permissive and being authoritarian. Right? So my question to you is, what do we do in such cases? What would you say to parents whose parenting styles are not in sync?
This is such a great question and such a valid, so relevant, because this happens all the time, right?
All the time, yeah.
You love everything about your partner and you think, what happened to the person before I had these kids, right? Suddenly this parenting collaboration looks like you're walking on eggshells every day with this person, right?
Yeah.
And this is not this is not something to be taken lightly at all, because definitely, like you said, all aspects of parenting are informed by culture. And each culture prescribes their own socialization patterns, their own parenting styles and traditions. And child rearing goals themselves can be very different, right? For example, just allow me to give you one very, very, interesting example. In Nordic countries, right? It's really common practice for babies to nap outside. Like parents put their babies outside the home to take naps, right? Parents in Norway, Sweden, and Finland believe that sleeping outside offers health benefits. Can you imagine that happening in India?
No.
Like babies are often bundled up and put down, and they're just happily in their strollers, even in the cold temperature.
Wow.
So it's a very subjective thing, but like you said, it's very important for partners to reconcile, because parenting partnership, unlike most other partnerships on projects, this is a very long term partnership, right? This is like, at least you're talking 18 years, and even after that, because obviously you are never going to cease being a parent, right? So one of the first thing that you can do is, like, sync up with your partner. Just kind of talk to him or her about how you feel about a certain situation and why you feel that way. For example, if there's a tantrum that you want handled a certain way, then you can talk to him or her about why you feel that this kind of treatment to the episode will, you think, will yield a better result, because you've read some research, you've seen some things happening, you've seen some other examples. You can talk and explain things to your partner. That is one. Two is definitely divide your duties, because it's definitely
divide and rule.
Yeah, divide and rule, because it just minimizes the time you spend stepping on each other's toes, right? So if there's feeding time, then one parent handles it. If there's bath time, then the other parent handles it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after a while, even the child kind of comes to expect it, right? And they know not to ask the other parent for, while one of the parents is available, they know what to ask whom, right? Because remember, children are very, very smart. I always, remember this example where my daughter, she was like, 1.5 years. Even my sister's daughter, I think you met her, right? That baby. She's so smart. She knows, who will pick her up and who will not.
Oh
So
my
she will not even lift her
God.
hands to the person.
Just imagine.
And say how much
A
of
non-verbal small young baby knows.
yeah. So children will understand. And if you know how to divide your parenting duties and know when to step off, right? Step off the scene. Children understand, and they also regulate their behavior according to that. And one of the rules is that you always put up a united front in front of the children.
That
and
is so
always
important.
and always discuss your problems, discuss your differences outside of the purview of children after the episode, after the event, right? And then decide on a plan of action, right? So this is where you will say that, hey, you know what, when there is this thing happening the next time, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do first. Try this first. And if this doesn't work, then please step in, right? And try your approach. So this can resolve a lot of differences and create a lot of peace at home.
Awesome. I think those are very good strategies. I would actually like to add one of my own, Shobha. Yesterday in a parent consultation, this mother from Hyderabad, she's like, what, my husband is standing there and screaming at my strong-willed child. And I can see that it's not working, because screaming definitely doesn't work with strong-willed kids. And I'm standing in a corner and cringing. And I'm like, oh my God, don't scream at her. I know how to handle her, but I don't want to say that out to him, because I know that's not nice. That's just me stepping over the line. So she's like, what do I do? And that's exactly what I suggested to her. I said that, catch your husband in a calmer state and tell him that, I noticed what happened in the morning. I saw you get increasingly frustrated. And in the future, when such situations happen, because, you are getting frustrated, she's not listening, the child is not listening to you, do you want me to step in and show like a small non-verbal signal to you, just to signal to you that, you can go and take your own time out and I can take over and handle the situation? And she really liked that idea because that doesn't step on her husband's toes. And yet, in a very calm way, it's actually approaching the husband from, from what will work with him. Because, it's like approaching the situation from, you were getting frustrated. And so this is something I would like to do for you, rather than
Right.
saying your approach was not effective and how dare you
Yeah.
scream at the child, kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I encourage parents to do that. I do that in my house when I see that I'm getting dysregulated. My husband and I have come up with a non-verbal sign where he
Hmm.
shows that sign to me, and I immediately sort of, because I want to take a moment to calm down, I immediately go into another room and he takes over, and vice versa.
Right.
I would like to believe he screams more at the kids than I do, of course, but that's another story. so, yeah, great. So thanks so much, Shobha. I think I really enjoyed our discussion today. I think it'll be very enlightening for our audience as well. And I hope all of us learn to tweak our parenting styles towards being more authoritative parents. It is not black or white ever. And each day we can try to do better. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next week for the next episode. So that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening to Big Talk About Tiny Humans, our podcast for parents and educators.
Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family.
Listen and subscribe to Big Talk About Tiny Humans on the IVM Podcasts app, website, and all major audio platforms. We are available everywhere.
You can follow us on social media and online. Meghna is at The Therapist Mommy on Instagram and YouTube. And do check out her website, raisingfamilyacademy.com, for a transformative course on raising your child with emotional intelligence.
And Devishobha is at KidsKintha on Twitter and Instagram. And check out kidskintha.com for in-depth articles and events on parenting and child development.
While you're at it, do also check out other great shows from the IVM Podcasts Network at shows.ivmpodcasts.com. And IVM is on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
We'll catch you again on our next episode.